You are here because of the extraordinary guest of honor that we have to address you tonight. Jean Chrétien is, above all, a politician, but he's also a lawyer. He entered Parliament in Ottawa 21 years ago, and at various times has held the portfolio with responsibility for Indian Affairs and Northern Development, the National Revenue. He's been President of the Treasury Board. He's been the Minister for Industry, Trade and Commerce. He's been the Minister for Social Development. Most well known to most of you, perhaps, is that, of course, he was the Minister of Justice during the protracted negotiations to conclude a constitutional agreement in Canada and to patriate Canada's constitution from the United Kingdom. He's known as a street fighter. His political style may suggest that to you as one of the most exciting politicians in Canada, but the nomenclature, in fact, derives from a period in which he apparently boxed his way through school. He also survived 2 political death sentences. That is, he was also Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources and Minister of Finance. He's a true son of Quebec in the broadest possible sense, being the 18th of 19 children. His last official position was as the Secretary of State for External Affairs, the last one of the Trudeau era. It's largely in that context that we've asked him to talk about relations between Canada and the United States tonight. But lest we leave his remarks tonight on a note of closure of an era that plainly now is being recorded historically, we should also remember that he was the runner-up in the contest for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada, the runner-up in a contest that was remarkably close, considering the tradition of the Liberal Party to alternate the leadership between Anglophone and Francophone politicians. There is now an Anglophone leader who was not enormously successful in the last election. That would suggest, without reaching too far, that this evening we may be privileged to listen to the remarks about relations between Canada and the United States of a future Prime Minister of Canada. It's my privilege to introduce to you the Honorable Jean Chrétien.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, the Council and mes chers amis. You know, of course, you know, that had nothing to do with the fact that I'm 18 out of 19. You know, I just so happy that the pill had not been invented in 1933. You will not have me around tonight. And it's one of the great things for me to come and speak in the United States. I made so many speeches in Canada that sometimes, you know, I'm shy with my own joke. So perhaps I can... And I have my wife with me who has been around my political career for 21 years and a half. She's known all of them since a long, long time. But coming here tonight, you know, I was surprised that to see the wife of the consul here, Madame Denson, didn't know about my royal jokes. Perhaps I should start about my royal jokes. You know, we have a monarch in Canada, don't you know that? And that goes like that. You know, in 1970, when I was Minister of Northern Affairs, Indian and Northern Affairs, Her Majesty the Queen came for the centennial of the Northwest Territories. And my wife and I, we spent 5 days in the North as hosts of Her Majesty the Queen, Prince Philip, Princess Anne, and Prince Charles. And when at the end of the trip we arrived in Fort Providence, Her Majesty unveiled a plaque for Mackenzie, who discovered the Mackenzie River. And at the end of the ceremony, the master of ceremony was supposed to come to the mic and sing O Canada. But he was so shy that he turned to me and he said, Mr. Minister, I cannot go there to sing. He said, I have a terrible voice. So I went to the mic and I did the call of duty. I started to sing O Canada. There were 3,000 people there, the TV, the radio, the royal family, and I started to sing O Canada. But, you know, I sing O Canada only in French. I don't know the words in English. I know that if I stand on guard 4D, I'm half of the time right, but I started to sing in French, and nobody came along with me. I was sweating. My wife said I've never been so shy in my life, but there is very few of us who have been soloists for the royal family, you know. So I survived that day. And about 6 months after that, in Ottawa, Prince Charles came. And all the ministers were there, and when he came to me, he said, "How are you, Mr. Chrétien?" And I said, "How come you are a lioness? You recognize me?" Well, he said, "Because of your singing of O Canada in the North last summer, I have to tell you, Mr. Chrétien, that it's now part of the royal folklore." So, you know, during that period of time, a year and a half, I had met with the royal family 5 times. 5 times in a year and a half for a French Canadian with the royal family, it's a lot. And so, you know, I was in London with my wife and daughter on business, and we were with the High Commissioner, who said to me, "Mr. Chrétien, tomorrow Her Majesty the Queen will be receiving 200 veterans of the First World War, and it will be very nice of you if you were to be there." I said, "I cannot be there. It's impossible. I've seen the royal family 5 times in a year and a half." So my wife and my daughter looked at me, and they wanted to see Buckingham Palace. As you know, it's a rather comfortable shack, you know. And so I went there, and the Queen didn't know who she was to me. The Buckingham Palace had been advised that there was to be a Canadian minister, but nobody knew who was the minister. So I was, you know, the 200 veterans were in a big room, and I was in the next room with my wife, my daughter, and the High Commissioner, because I am a PC, not a progressive conservative, a private consular, and the Queen, according to protocol, has to receive us in private. So, before meeting you people, you know, she has to receive the big shot like us. So I was very nervous waiting there, you know. So 2 big doors open, and here comes the Queen and Prince Philip. And when she saw me, she said, "Again?" And I said, "Your Majesty, I am the royalist from Quebec." But, you know, in politic life, all sort of things happen to you, and I can carry on, with your permission, with these, before I read my text. You know, I'm not a good reader. You know, perhaps I can tell you some of a personal experience. You were talking about my experience in politics, and one of some good ones, the campaign of, in 1965, I became the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Finance, Mitchell Sharp. And, you know, my English is not perfect. So in those years, it was less perfect than today. There's only Maurice Chevalier and I who ever practiced to keep the proper accent in English. But, so, in 1965, I was parliamentary secretary to Mitchell Sharp, who was the then Minister of Finance. And he said, he got me in a meeting, a big meeting with the, you know, he was there, his deputy minister, the governor of the Bank of Canada, and all those big shots. And for an hour and a half, we discussed balance of payment, bond issues, interest rates, deficit, and all these very important problems. So at the end of the meeting, Mitchell came to me and he said, "John, you know, you had been at a very secret meeting. You shall not talk to anybody about it." And I replied to Mitchell, "Mitchell, don't be worried. I have not understood anything at all." So 2 years later, I was Minister of National Revenue. And I was in BC campaigning, explaining the balance of payment and so on in my own language. And I arrived in Vancouver, and the press asked me, "Mr. Chrétien," you know, it was the first year of Trudeau, "what will be the policies of the Trudeau administration vis-à-vis the Indians of Canada?" I said, "The Indians?" I said, "Do you want a frank answer?" He said, "Yes." I said, "I don't know a goddamn thing about it." So 3 weeks after, I was Minister of Indian Affairs and Northern Development. So, you know, don't stay too long at the university. And you might know too much. When Trudeau appointed me, he said, I'm appointed you because I know that you have no prejudice at all. So, but I'm supposed to be serious here. Being at Harvard, it's a very serious place. I was very impressed to be invited here, coming from Shawinigan. And I must tell you at the very outset that I am somewhat humbled by the prospect of addressing such an august body as this. The academic prestige assembled on the letterhead upon which I received my invitation to come to Cambridge is almost overwhelming. In the past few months, however, I have gotten somewhat used of being overwhelmed. In the spring, I aspired to be Prime Minister. That did not work out. In the summer, I aspired to remain part of the government, and that did not quite work out either. In accepting Mr. Brown's kind invitation to speak here tonight, I originally aspired to be witty, informative, and controversial. But in light of my recent track record in the aspiration department, I have changed my mind. I think I would just try to be cantankerous, open-eared, and see if I cannot succeed at that. I was given a choice of topics. Either the challenge facing the Liberal Party or the future of Canada-U.S. relations. As you can probably understand, I found the first topic just a little painful, so I have chosen the second. Clearly, ladies and gentlemen, no one, save a fortune teller, can speak with confidence about the future. There are simply too many imponderables, too many unknowns. Accordingly, the future of Canada-U.S. relations are as much a mystery to me as they are to all of you. What I have are views of what course those relations should follow, and fears that the present regime in Canada, in Ottawa, in attempting to establish a Canadian-U.S. relationship of undisturbed harmony, is not only deluding itself, but threatening to do a real disservice to North Americans generally, and Canadians particularly. I suppose there is nothing dangerous in referring to the Americans, as Prime Minister Brian Mulroney constantly does, as our best friends. But if I may be permitted an opinion, I find the repetition of this sentiment just a little bit immature. It reminds me rather more of a young school child attempting to cement relations with an older student than of international diplomacy. Clearly, Canada and the United States are on friendly terms. We are good neighbors. We are philosophically aligned in many ways. We are chief trading partners. We share common lifestyles. We intermarry. We attend each other's universities. We travel freely across each other's land. We do so much together and have so few barriers between us that we could easily roll up the border and become one large and prosperous national entity. We could, but we do not choose to do so. It is not a choice based on a degree of friendliness. It is not that we like Margaret Thatcher better than Ronald Reagan, or that we'll not marry you because we are hoping to be asked by Mexico. Friendship is not an issue. We choose not to be assimilated for the same reason that you would make that choice were it offered to you. Quite simply, we Canadians want our own nation. Since 1867, we have worked with a single-mindedness on nothing else. We built our railroads, opened our frontiers, helped defeat tyranny in 2 world wars, established social programs like Medicare that we that are the envy of the world, overcame the threat of separation from within, and rebuilt our nation's laws on a new constitutional foundation strengthened by a new Charter of Rights and Freedom. We are building our nation as we choose, and as much possible, we wish to determine what place our nation will take in the world. It's not a question of degree of friendship. It is a matter of free choice and of healthy pride. We wish to decide who will be our allies, to decide from whom we will buy, to decide to whom we will sell, to decide what role our people will play in building security and fighting peace in the world. We know our limitations, the restriction placed upon a population of our size, but we have our own dreams, and we are excited by the potential of our country holds. No doubt, Canada and United States will always remain close allies. You Americans are our neighbors, our chief trading partners, and culturally, with the exception of the French factor, the clearest image of ourselves. The ties that bind us as friends have always been and will remain unbreakable. But I hold the view that Canadians must be forthright enough to remind their southern neighbors that we are an independent country. The ties between Canada and the U.S. are products of rational choice. Canada sees itself as a sovereign nation, and the United States as an equal partner in the global village. We expect to be treated as equals. We expect our interests to be viewed as important by you Americans, just as we hold sacred the sovereignty of your democracy. We are good friends. Best friends, if that distinction brings you some measure of happiness. But we are not clones. Like all good friends, we have and will have differences. If we are really good friends, we should be able to tell each other the truth as we see it. I personally expect my best friend to tell me like it is. And I cannot hope anything from someone who thinks he's my best friend. The American view of peace and security in the world is not always ours. I would like to see Washington and Moscow stop stockpiling arms and start talking about peace and disarmament. I would like to see an end to all intervention in Central America. And the word all obviously include American intervention. Do I offend you by saying this? I hope not. That is certainly not my intention. I merely wish to give you my views. We have other differences. I object to the new mood of protectionism that thrives in the United States, but I understand it. I object to extraterritorial American legislation that inhibits Canadian subsidiaries of American companies from trading freely abroad, but I understand why such legislation exists. I object to American interest rate policies that force us to follow suit, but I do not question your right to follow that economic course. I will go further. Your administration's apparent indifference to acid rain and other pollutants shocks me. I do not believe that more research is a viable reason to delay action. I've seen the damage. Our forests and our lakes, just like your forests and your lakes in New England, are dying now. Canadians want action now. These are important differences, but they are differences between old and trusting allies. In a tension-filled world, we cannot allow such differences to build barriers on our borders. We must feel free to disagree, But when we do, we should do so openly, and we must work out our disagreement in the same open fashion. As separate sovereign states, as nations which are and are seen to be different, Canada and the United States can do more for the cause of democracy and peace than ever we could do united. The United States is a superpower whose goal and defined sphere of influence clash continually with the ambitions of the USSR. Consequently, the United States found itself cut off from direct negotiations with a number of Soviet-affiliated countries or other nations. Some of those countries, however, feel able to maintain good relations with Canada. It might be a touching demonstration of friendship to declare ourselves unconditionally supportive of all American policies. But in a very real sense, such a show of support will sever completely North Americans' only direct ties with some nations. To be credible spokesmen for democracy, Canadians must be seen to have a credible and separate foreign policy. Having said all of that, I want to say as well that I recognize that Canada must pay a price for sovereignty. I am quite aware that if Canadians want the luxury of criticizing the United States, they must accept the fact that Americans will feel free to criticize Canada. Let me repeat, my intention in criticizing certain American foreign policies is not to offend my neighbors. But by the same logic, I'm not offended when Americans disagree with us. Not at all. When former Prime Minister Trudeau received the Einstein Prize for his effort, there were some American officials who criticized the award. Earlier, one of the President Reagan's aides was positively insulting in his assessment of what Mr. Trudeau was trying to do with his peace mission. So be it. I think they were wrong. I do not like it, but it is your right. You have no duty to lend your support to our every international move. That is the price we pay for sovereignty. It is a price Canadians are willing to pay, and it is an investment which I believe will yield great dividends in the form of international credibility. The approach of the new administration in Ottawa appear to be taking is far less likely to produce rewards. Prime Minister Mulroney seems to have isolated one factor, business, and began to fashion his entire view of Canadian-American relations in an effort to make business and profits for all increase. Taken in isolation, it is hard to disapprove of such a goal. The problem is, nothing that transpires between nations can be viewed properly in isolation. That is the fatal flaws of this approach. It is admittedly early to tell, but it appears as true, too, that the present government is willing to risk losing almost any long-term benefits in exchange for closer American business relations and higher profits now. To that end, the Foreign Investment Review Act, hardly a unique body in the world, is to be practically disbanded. Instead, we are to have a new organization of solicitors and drummers called Investment Canada, dedicated to luring American dollars over the 49 parallels at virtually any cost. I question the wisdom of this move. There is no evidence that in its 10 years of operation, FIRA damaged American opportunities in Canada. Today, the U.S. has over 100 billion Canadian dollars in direct and portfolio investment in our country. The FIRA mandate was to ensure that such investments were as advantageous as possible for Canadians. And in fact, we have accepted, on average, 95% of them, sometimes with some modification. At times, the agency may have been overly enthusiastic in fulfilling that mandate, but I believe that if Canadians hope to build and maintain their own industrial base, some form of investment review is both necessary and constructive. Again, I think for his business-oriented perspective, Mr. Mulroney has pledged to revamp Canada's national energy program. International Trade Minister James Kelleher has announced an end to what he called retroactivity and discrimination in NAP. By this statement, I assume he intends to end the so-called back-in provision that guarantee a 25 crown share in all projects in Canada land. I believe that objections to the backing provisions are misplaced and misinformed. It's amusing to me to see investors quietly accepting, as if by right, the tax incentives and grants available in Canada, but bitterly and loudly denouncing the concept of Canadians setting up some long-term benefits for themselves. The back-in provisions in other countries are far higher. Drilling there continues. I was in Norway, for example. Yet the Conservative government is backing down and risking our energy security because he wants Canada and the United States to be best friends. If Canada backs down on every issue that threatens perfect harmony between us and the U.S., its short-term purchase of friendship will be made at enormous long-term cost. It is the duty of any administration to ensure that the survival of its country's economic identity. That is a far different task than merely stepping up business in quest for quick profit. This is the task of nation building. I am known in Canada as a patriot. I make no apologies for that. But I wave the flag. I do not use it as a blindfold. I'm not an isolationist. Canada and United States are uniquely joined. I can think of no other international relationship that is closer by design and free choice. Beggaring ourselves before our powerful neighbor will not bring us closer. A partnership between equals is one thing. A master and servant relationship is quite another. Tonight, I can look back on the Pearson and Trudeau years where I served as a minister in government, and I can see we made mistakes. Certainly, the impact of some initiatives could have been softened by more consultation. But despite the differences and occasional disputes, those 20 years created strong ties between our nations, and I'm proud of these achievements. When I tend to look forward over the next 4 or 5 years, I'm not that enthusiastic about what I think I see. If the new government desire to please is construed in Washington and abroad as subservience, then Canada, the United States, and the state of East-West relationship generally will emerge much the poorer for it. I say at the outset that I am not a fortune teller, that all I can offer you this evening are my views. My present view is clouded by the belief that the new administration foreign policy can best be described by inverting the equation that commentator used in 1979 to characterize the economic policies of Canada's last Conservative Prime Minister, Joe Clark. What we have with Mr. Mulroney is short-term gain for long-term pain. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to be here tonight. I would like to have some questions because, you know, now I'm in the opposition in Ottawa. For 17 years and a half, I was answering questions. And now I have to ask questions, and I did not frame my mind to it as yet as it was. I know that when in our Canadian system, to be in the opposition, you know, it's easy. You know, you don't know what the other guy will do, but you know he is wrong. That is That is the base of our system. That's what we got from the British. So it's not very rational for a Frenchman like me, but it's very British in tradition. And so I'd like to go back to my role of answering questions tonight. And thank you for your attention. And with your permission, I will repeat all of that in French. Merci beaucoup. Who shoot first? Yes, sir. And speak loud. There is people in the back. Should I translate? You know, we the liberals, we change leader only every 16 years. But in 16 years, I will be almost 10 years younger than Reagan. But my wife don't agree. I don't know. You know what? Should I run again? I don't know. I ran and I lost. And I shook hands with Mr. Turner. And you know, I'm like that. I will not campaign against him. But I cannot, I told you I cannot read the future. That's what I told you in my speech about U.S.-Canada relations. I don't, you know, I will serve under Mr. Turner. But if there is an opening, I will assess the situation at that time. And I don't know. I had a good crack at it, 21 years and a half. I've been a minister 17 years and a half. And I have no commitment with destiny. I'm not like Joe Clark. I never told my professor I would be prime minister. Next question.
I'd like to know whether you believe, or you stated your displeasure with the Mulroney administration, and you believe that they could lead Canada down the wrong road in reference to its relationship with the United States, and that it could have been or could be a servant of the master. What do you see Canada's role being in South America, for example, Argentina, or in Central America, Nicaragua?
You know, I think that we need to have our own position there. Personally, I disagree with the Mulroney administration when they refused to send an observer to the election in Nicaragua. I expressed the view for my party that we should have had, and before we should send an observer there. It was difficult in my mind for Canada to have sent observers at the election in San Salvador and not to have observer in Nicaragua. But they didn't send anybody there. And when I look at that in retrospect, despite of the fact that there was a lot of opposition parties who did not run, the opposition in Nicaragua managed to get more than 30% of the votes. And with not all of them there, everyone predicted that it was to be a landslide of 95 or 99 like in Russia. I don't like to admit that, but the opposition party in Nicaragua had more votes than the Liberals in Canada. And twice as much as the NDP. So, you know, it was, in my judgment, something wrong, that I don't agree with that. Why not? In those countries, you know, they are not used to our own. One of the difficulties we're having in the Western world is we tend to apply our own standards to others all the time. We have lived with democracies for centuries, and we hope that the others will adjust to that system immediately with the same perfection that we have had. But, you know, we're not perfect. 40 years ago in Canada, the woman had not the right to vote in my province. You know, and I was born at that time. Would you believe it? So it was not perfect. You know, in Canada, we have given the woman equality in the Constitution to the man. It's not arrived yet in the United States. Now the women in Canada are equal to the men. They are no more superior, they are equal. But we've done it. So that means that there is always progress in a democracy. And the ERA amendment, you're fighting for it in the United States since how long? 40 years, 50 years? We've done it with the Liberals in Canada for that, and we lost the election. And, you know, it's just to show that you cannot have the rewards that they deserve, but that's politics. Yes. In working hard, you should never give up. That is the problem, the frustration. The Tories never gave up in Quebec, and they got some short-term dividends, I hope. And I say to my Western friends, they did not like to vote for the Liberals because they felt that the Liberals were run from Quebec and Ontario. Now it's the Tory party who is run from Quebec and Ontario. So I hope they will learn not to put all their eggs in one basket next election. But you have to try. I have done my best. I have 250 relatives in Alberta. It's too bad that they are not all in one riding. We might have a chance. Next. Yes, sir. I think that it will come if the province of Quebec is reasonable. You know, the reason why Quebec did not sign in 1982, there was only 3 items in the project that was not acceptable. But from the beginning I knew that it was impossible for a party that was dedicated to the separation of Quebec from Canada to suddenly become the father of the new confederation. So they were very clever. They managed for 2 years to block us. I don't blame them. It was very logical for them to prove to themselves that Canada could not work. I blame some of the provinces who were in bed with them for their naivety. It took them 2 years to realize it, that they were being used. But, you know, I don't blame the PQ government at that time. Because now it will be different. They are dropping clause number 1 of their program. So I'm happy. You know, I congratulated last week all the new Federalists from Quebec. And I congratulated all those who kept their principles and remained separatists. But it was naive for a lot of observers to think that if the deal had been better, they would have signed. They could not. And it was absolutely logical and not dishonest. You know, they were the government and they were playing the game the best they could. But we, coming from Quebec, I am a Quebecer, and we were 74 members in our party. But I have to admit that the people were fed up with those fights. And it's why we lost the election. You know, they are happy that we've done it, but they wanted to forget about it. It's why they voted against us. And it is the rewards of politics. People forget very quickly what you've done. There was one in the black with the red sweater. Anyway, he's given up. You, sir, get up. Yes. There is a treaty of to make sure that there is not double taxation between Canada and the United States. I don't know how your problem occurred, but in theory there should not be double taxation. I guess there must be a lot of bureaucrats around it. But I'm a former minister. I'm not a bureaucrat. So there is a treaty of not double taxation between the two countries. But there is, you pay taxes in Canada, yes, when you invest in Canada. Just we pay taxes in the United States when we invest in the United States. It's pretty normal. Because you make your gain in Canada with your money. Yes? The idea is falling apart. The party might survive as a new Union Nationale, a nationalist party à la Daniel Johnson, who used to say égalité or indépendant. But they are putting in the fridge their separatist options. And Parti Québécois might be something else. If you think in terms of a separatist party, yes, it's falling apart. But as a political entity, they're changing their goals. And they might manage to survive politically and be reelected, but not speaking about separatism. So for me, it's a great victory as a Canadian politician from Quebec that Mr. Lévesque has decided to concede that he cannot go anywhere with separation. Any other question? Yes, sir. Can you come to the mic?
In a recent Gulf of Maine decision, Canada annexed what many people would consider to be part of the United States.
Something that we think that it's part of Canada, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, I'm a Canadian. In your opinion, what impact will this decision have on future Canadian-American relations and negotiations?
I think that the legal regime has been clarified, and part of it is American, parts of it is Canadian. And after that, we'll have to be rational in developing a joint policy for management of the resource there that is depleting a bit too fast. We'll have to be reasonable on both sides. But the fishermen from Nova Scotia are not happy, and the fishermen from Maine are not happy. But it's always like that in any dispute. Everybody wanted to have it all. And we both agreed to give the problem to the International Court of La Haye. And they decided that way. And we have to live with it. So I don't say I'm happy or unhappy. As a Canadian, I'm supposed to say I'm unhappy. Because the American would say he's unhappy. But I have to live with the reality. Yes, sir. They said they were to do that, and the first thing they did, it was to cut $200 million from the budget 3 weeks ago. I call it speaking on both sides of their mouth, something I cannot do. Next. Yes, sir. What kind of disastrous effect you're talking about? You know, the drilling in Canada was as good or as bad than in Louisiana. The problem of the softening of the oil industry has nothing to do with the NEP. It has to do with the decline in the price internationally. Everybody in the oil industry had made their prediction of a barrel of oil to be $70 a barrel. And their prediction were wrong. For the industry, just like 4 hours. You know, and it's why there was, in Canada, the oil industry get more money per barrel of oil today than they had when Joe Clark was the Prime Minister. We took more money from the public side. We took money away from Mr. Lloyd in Alberta to take it into the national treasury. but the industry share is bigger than it was in 79. But with the PGRT tax, we managed to take revenue that was going in royalties in the coffer of the Alberta government, who were building a huge heritage fund, and we took some of it for the good of all the Canadians. And if Canadians cannot share their wealth when they have it, you don't have a nation anymore. And the industry keep bitching. But every industry does it. I never seen the private sector happy. And they will never be happy. That's the nature of the system. The minute that you say you're happy, the people move on you. They're never happy. Even in the United States, they are not happy. Have you ever had a private discussion with the Texans about their oil, that the profit goes to Washington and to those Yankees on the East Coast? I have. Same thing in England. The people from Scotland complain that the oil from the North Sea is going to London. I remember a great ironic sign in many years ago when I visited the field there in Edinburgh. There was a big sign: Scottish gas, natural gas to London with love. It's natural. Everybody in a society wants to have a bigger share. And when you're the government, you get it on the nose all the time. But the industry in Canada face the same problems than the industry anywhere in the world. The price is declining. And if you have made your forecast for future cash flow and investment on a product that you will produce on a daily basis that many tons or barrels, and the price that was supposed to go to $70 suddenly go down from 30 to 29, 28, 27, and so on, you complain. And who you complain to? The government. But I can go on and on. I made deals with the provinces in the West on these things quite easily. But the rhetoric is the same. It's the difficulty to be a central party, like we are the Liberals. We're not doctrinaire. So we're very useful in period of crisis, because the center party, being not doctrinaire, can make the balancing act. But when there is no great crisis, the doctrinaires take over. And if you're the Liberal, you get it from both sides. The Tories will tax the business more than we ever done. Watch it. And the business will love it, because they will think it's for their own good. And a socialist government can suck it to the unions without complaint, because they think it's for their own good. But when you're the Liberals in the middle, you got it from both sides. And they go to you in period of crisis. And when there is no more crisis, they don't need you anymore. And, today in Canada, people don't give us credit. In the month of May 1980, in the 20th of May, the 19th, in Shawinigan, the night before the referendum, my wife asked me, Jean, do you think that tomorrow will still be Canadian? It's a telling question. And we won the referendum. 4 years later, the Parti Québécois option is falling apart. What has been our reward for that? 40 seats in Parliament. And people say, yeah, but if we have the Tories, inflation might have been 1 point lower. Or unemployment would have been 2 points lower. Yes, but what it is compared to keeping your country together forever. And it's not guaranteed that inflation will have been lower, and there is not a guarantee that unemployment will have been lower, but it's the frustration of politics. So, and I'm not complaining. I accept the verdict of the population. I'm a Democrat in Canada. One more question, or, same price anyway, but it's free.
My question relates to the relationship between Canada and the United States, the master-slave relationship, the equal partnership that you were talking about. For the last 6 years, the Boston Bruins have denied the Edmonton Oilers a victory in the Boston Garden. Never had they won here. Last night they came in, took half the shots the Bruins did, and scored twice as many goals for their first victory, and I wondered what you thought about the long-term implications of that.
I call it natural justice. Yes.
As a former Canadian Minister of Finance, I'm wondering what advice you'd give to Michael Wilson in trying to manage Canada's deficit.
Not to tape conversation with other ministers. No, I'm joking. The big problem in Canada that the business community seems to be obsessed about is the deficit. And he will do everything he can to reduce the deficit. Probably at the expense of unemployment. And I do think personally that Canada does not face it's a serious problem. I don't deny it. But our resources in Canada are underemployed. We have 1.5 million of our labor force who is not working. And if you just single-minded go at the reduction of the deficit, you will increase the number of unemployed. It's a very difficult thing to balance. For me, I'm not sanguine about the deficit for one reason. In Canada, the deficit is all internal. The deficit is financed internally. The Canadians have 14% of their earnings going in savings, while you in the United States, you have 5%. So, what is happening, it was the case 2 weeks ago, our annual campaign to raise money for Canada bonds had to be cut short because there was too much money coming in. So our credit must still be good. People have no confidence in the government, but they buy bonds from the government, not from GM. And what is, and the business say, yeah, but if we were to run our business that way, we'll go bankrupt. And I'm telling you, yeah. But a government is not a business. In the United States, you have had 8 or 9 balanced budgets since 1931. The majority of them by Democrats. Would you believe it? President Reagan got elected to balance the book. And after 4 years of hard work, he has reduced the deficit from $50 billion to $214 billion. It's a hell of a success, It's a reality. The question is, can you finance it? That is a natural limit to deficit. You know when it is? Is when you cannot pay the interest anymore. Or when you cannot, and that day you cannot borrow anymore. But let me give you an example. If you're an investor, and all the people do it, you buy Canada bonds in Canada. I'll make figures very simple. You buy a bond of $1,000 today, my savings. My marginal rate is 50%. I buy a bond of $1,000. The government will pay me at the end of the year $100 in interest, say, but will tax $50 of it. Would you agree? And my marginal rate is 50. I will hold the bonds for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, they will give me my $1,000. That it's worth $500 by that time. What is the net cost to the government? Not much. And it had been like that since the Depression. We paid the debt of the war, the Korean War that way. And people keep buying Canada bonds. And everyone does it because we're putting money aside for our old age. My father, died at 93 and was still saving money for his old age. And he gave me a little bit of money, not much, a few $1,000s, that I was mad to take it. It was his blood of the 50s of the blue collar. And it was perhaps the 1 or 2 trips he could have made, more. But now he had this preoccupation that he might not have enough money until he died, and this old concept that I will leave money to my kids. And everybody does it. But the dollar you save today, if you keep it in paper, will not be worth much in 30 years from now. You see what is happening to the pound. They make it in metal now. That's a big sign of what it is. It's just what they call it, not a crown, but a Maggie. And, but it is the reality. And government have financed themselves like that since a hell of a long time. So, of course, we're not business. And if they are single-minded about it, it will not affect a bit the interest rates in Canada, because the interest rates in Canada are set here in the United States, and they are set for around the world. And if our rates are not competitive with the United States, the savings of the Canadian will come in the United States to get a better return. So we have to have competing interest rates in Canada. It's not an easy problem. I've been Minister of Finance. I'm very happy not to be anymore Minister of Finance. But I think that if they are single-minded about it, I might pay somewhat that they'll be there. Watch the criticism in a year from now. Now it's not the time to move. They are on their honeymoon. We'll wait until the dishes are flying in the kitchen, and we'll move. So we'll take a last question from that lady. And
before you leave tonight, would you mind singing "O Canada" for us, please?
No. No. You want me? Vous voulez que je fasse un discours en français, mais pas pour chanter au Canada en français. Vous voulez chanter au Canada? Ben, levez-vous debout. Au Canada, terre de nos aïeux, ton front est ceint de fleurons glorieux, car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits, et ta valeur de foi trempée protégera nos foyers et nos droits. Protégera nos foyers et nos droits. Merci.
The